Hey, it's Jake and Paula with Tartan Developments. We're back with another whiteboard video, and today we're going to talk about what we look for a secondary dwelling unit conversion here in London, Ontario. We'll call them SDUs. So for the first thing is zoning, and thankfully here in London, any residential zoning allows for a secondary dwelling unit, but it has to be a secondary and not like a third unit. For the secondary dwelling unit, it can only be 40% of the gross floor area. So say like typical bungalow, it'd be 60% upstairs and 40% downstairs. So that's why I call it a secondary dwelling unit, not a duplex. The duplex doesn't have those restrictions. So number two is what we look for is a separate entrance. Not a necessity, not a deal breaker, but definitely makes things easier and also cuts down on your renovation costs. So a lot of the bungalows have like a back entrance or a side entrance. Same with like split levels, either have a side or a back entrance. There's definitely ways to add them that aren't too expensive, but you just have to factor that into your renovation costs. So number three is parking. So in London, there's no bylaw that states that you have to have separate parking or a certain number of parking spots for an SDU. But I know personally, Paul and I kind of go back and forth. I know I like to have at least 2 parking spots, so 1 for each unit, and not tandem, so side by side, so no one's having to jockey cars around. And ideally, I would say 3 or 4. But another thing too to look for is if it's just a single drive, ways to convert it to a double. And the ways you can do that without getting a permit is just kind of do, we've done this before. So you have the single drive, you just do like a sidewalk. So you're not breaking up the curb or anything. You just kind of like do that and angle it up so you can get 2 cars side by side. And that works nice. No permit needed. And 2 cars side by side. So that's handy. I like the side by side versus the tandem.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just think that there are some spots like downtown that you don't necessarily need 2 spots for every unit.
For sure. 2 spots. All right, the fourth thing is ceiling height. Something you definitely look for. Another thing that's can be corrected but very expensive with underpinning. So I would try to avoid that unless you have a smoking deal. But ceiling height has to be 6'8" for at least 50% of the area. I'll let Paula catch up here.
And that's just Ontario Building Code.
Yeah. And then for stairs, it has to be at least 5'11". So if you're going down or up the stairs, the ceiling height has to be 5'11" at the stair to the top of the ceiling. And then if that staircase is an egress route, it actually has to be 6'5", correct?
Yeah.
6'5".
Okay.
And the last thing we like to look for or consider is egress windows. This is usually for the below grade unit, and especially in the bedrooms. Sometimes it's not a necessity, but we always like to consider safety first and have egress windows in every bedroom. And the minimum on that is
3.8
square feet. So the window has to be 3.8 square feet with a minimum unobstructed opening of 15 inches.
Yeah.
So that just means you have 15 inches unobstructed for someone to get through.
And maybe one video we'll find like a 15-inch square and then
I'll crawl through it.
Try to get through it.
Yeah, sounds good. So thanks for watching. These are the things we look for when sourcing out SDU conversions here in London.
And most things you can work with, but if you find all of these things ready to go, you're gonna cut your renovation costs
makes things easier.
down. So yeah. Anyway, like this video.
Oh yeah, it's been a while. I forgot about that. So smash that like button. And what else was there?
Subscribe.
Smash that subscribe button.
Don't
Thanks,
forget it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.